Hello, everybody. The taproom landscape, it's changing. No longer can a brewery simply make quality beer. The perfect brewery experience now exists at the intersection of delicious beverages, a memorable atmosphere, and engaging staff. When you successfully understand your guest goals, expectations, and exceed them, you create a repeat customer that craves your taproom. Today, we're going to learn from industry voices who will share both the data and their firsthand brewery experiences on what the taproom guest wants in 2024. Now, let's meet our panelists. And because Kindsey, you are to the right of me, you get to go first.
Hey everyone, my name is Kindsey Bernhard, and I am the Director of Hospitality at Austin Beerworks in Austin, Texas. I oversee both tap rooms. We just opened a second tap room in June of just last year, so not even a year old. So I oversee both tap rooms, their staffs, all the private and just public events in the tap room, and then as well as our food truck at our original location.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. You and I were in a panel quite a few years ago together, and now I really need to come out to Austin.
You do. The weather is beautiful today. It's a high of 72 and sunny. So
stop right now.
Making me jealous, Kindsey.
Yeah. Michael, you're up.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Varda. I'm the founder of Craft Beer Advisory Services. We are a market research and analytics firm dedicated to the craft beer industry. We regularly do reports on national trends, both in the tap room, and look at generational insights. What does Gen Z want? What do millennials want? Very excited to be here and chat about the latest in tap room trends.
Michael, I like you as a person, but I absolutely love your data.
Thank you so much.
Josh, good to see you.
Yeah, howdy. Josh Lindsay here with MarketMyBrewery by BrewLogix. We provide a complete solution for craft beverage manufacturers, consumers, really a whole suite of products that support the craft beverage industry, from marketing platform aimed at producers to brewery discovery applications for consumers. So looking forward to kind of utilizing what we do as a company here, as well as leaning on some of my experience in the past with education in craft beer, kind of throughout the U.S. So excited to be here and excited to have this conversation.
Josh, I think I need to make a highlight reel of all the times you say howdy to start a conversation.
Hey, it breaks the ice really easy, you know.
Love it. Ari, great to see you as always.
Hello. Good to see everyone. My name is Ari Sanders. I'm Director of Tavern Operations at Fullsteam Brewery in lovely Durham, North Carolina. I've got 2 tap rooms, one in RTP, which is trying to turn into a live, work, play kind of situation, and one in the heart of downtown Durham. Both serving food, one of them 7 days a week, but 2 completely separate food concepts. So manage all that.
Awesome. Well, we've got a lot to cover today, everyone. So appreciate everybody tuning in or watching after the fact. So let's kick things off. Now, how is the taproom audience changing? That's a big question. And Michael, you have a fascinating data set. I'd love for you to kick this one off.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about the taproom audience, what they're looking for now, as you hinted at in the kickoff, it's so much more than good beer. So of the 5 main factors that people are mentioning in their taproom experiences, number 1 is beer and drink variety. So a little asterisk there. It's not even just beer, but then it's food, service, staff, environment. And then after that, it's actually entertainment. People mentioning specific beers actually ranks 7 out of 10 in the overall experience of what people are remembering most. And when we look at, positive and negative experiences and converting those positives to return customers, it is a lot more involved than just the beer.
That's fascinating.
I would agree with Michael for sure. I think everyone learned how to cook at home. A lot of people bought a kegerator, so what is it that you're doing to make someone join you? For us in particular, our brewery concept is 13 years old. We popped the cap in North Carolina. And, like a lot of breweries do, we moved into kind of a low rent, kind of empty part of town that's now become the heart of downtown Durham growth. We went from no neighbors other than people who live in the neighborhoods kind of backing us, younger families, to people renting $2,700 two bedrooms literally beside us, like sharing an alleyway, like egress into brand new condos, into like a 2-story twin tower thing across the street. So we've definitely had some major demographic changes. Just the average income in our zip code has really changed, and it just makes people kind of think about a different experience than what we started with, and we're adapting.
Well, I think the interesting too is if when you look at just craft consumers as a whole, like the group that kind of built craft, their landscape has changed too. Many of us now have families where if we've established in our professional career, we feel it a little bit more the next morning. So all of those considerations are happening too. So I think you can almost zoom out a little bit and say, as you see how the craft consumer has aged with us, and that's not to say that we're not bringing in new consumers and then potentially some other consumers are passing up. But if we just look at that core demographic that really built craft, we see that shift. And that's kind of what's happening with the trends that have come in tap rooms is look where they are in their life. They've got families, they've established professionally. Many of them are still dealing with debt. And so all of those things play into their ability to come to the tap room. So I find that to be really intriguing. I think oftentimes we look at it and we're like, what is happening? Where are the guests? Like, what are all these shifts coming from? And it's really just these people are in a different stage of life. And how does that translate? And how do we react to that as an industry is, I think, the key element. And I'm assuming what's going to be some great insights shared from this panel.
Josh, I mentioned it quite a bit, but the brewery is now looking to appeal to not just, the beer nerd like all of us, but also the kid we're bringing along with us. Now, Kindsey, what are you seeing in Austin?
Yeah, hitting, saying the fact that people aren't coming in for beer anymore is right. People are coming for the experience, for the, the food, or, you just mentioned kids. That's something we at Austin Beerworks have really focused on, is making sure our tap rooms are kid friendly. And I know that's a huge,
let's not make this too controversial, Kindsey,
topic in the beer world, but we've seen it work. We have a little play area at our original tap room. It's like these mounds with turf. And then a huge part of our opening our another tap room was building this big playground. And, we see on a Saturday afternoon from like 11 to 2, just like hordes of families coming in at the playground. But guess what? Those parents are drinking. Those kids are ordering our Capri Suns that we sell behind the bar. That's bringing in money. They're eating at our food truck. That's, as much as it can be frustrating for our staff to deal with, chaotic kids running around the tap room, we gave them a designated space where it's like, okay, the families and the crazy kids can hang down, it's kind of like down the hill a little bit. Our new tap room sits on 64 acres of land. So we have a lot of space. So we kind of put them away from everyone. So, your average drinker who doesn't want to deal with the kids can kind of come in. But yeah, just kind of leaning on those things, like families need places to go. Parents want to drink, how do we get that money? And, having those experiences for families and kids to come in. Yes, we're not marketing to the kids, we're marketing to the parents that'll sit there and stay, and have another beer. Is something we've really seen a shift in since we opened this tap room. We're going on 13 years too, and then to opening this new one last year or 6 months ago.
Awesome.
A key thing you mentioned there, Kindsey, seems like some intentionality around it. You said, here's what's happening, here's what our demographics need, and building that experience for them with intention versus, oh, some kids are here, what do we do now?
Yes.
That's a very different way of handling families, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when we first opened, the biggest complaint we saw on like a Reddit thread was kids running through the tap room, and the playground was open at the time, but we opened in June and August. Nobody's going to want to be outside in June, July, and August. We had one of the hottest summers that they've had in a while. So we had a private event space that was accessible through the tap room. We said, hey, this is the family room. You guys, at first we didn't have it accessible at all times. So we were just like, hey, if you have a kid and a family, well, we have TVs in there. We threw cartoons. We brought some like puzzles and books, and we're like, bring your kids out here and go in this room to kind of stay away from the other customers who kind of want to come and, don't want to be around screaming kids. Yeah. So a lot of the things we've done at this new tap room is very intentional of what we've seen works and doesn't work, at our current tap room and just in this industry. We read Reddit threads, we would reread Facebook comments. We're seeing what people are wanting and the feedback, and then, making changes based on that. We're fine with saying, oh yeah, you're right, this is not working, let's fix it. And I think,
that intentionality too. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think being able to be like, oh my gosh, this isn't going right, or we're doing something wrong, and acknowledging it and then fixing it is also really important for your customers to see. We're very active on Reddit and social media. So we replied and be like, hey, thank you for all of the criticisms. Here's what we're doing now. And we've got a lot of good feedback from it.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, Andrew, I think with that intentionality, we're using kids as an example. I think we've got 2 kid-friendly or kid-appreciated breweries. But that doesn't have to be the only thing that you can be intentional about. You can be intentional being the other way too. So for those of you who are tuning in and listening and don't want to be a kid-friendly place, I think that's totally fine too. It's just having the intentionality of it. If you want to be a death metal brewery, be intentional about it and bring people in. Not that kids can't like death metal, but thinking about all of that too. So I think you can take what we're saying with kids and use that with any sort of thing that you're going to be intentional about designing, purpose-built the space and the environment that you're creating. Because I know as a young, parent with a 2-year-old, like I'm not a big believer of kids in breweries, and I see myself bringing them in. There's a time and place for it. But I think when we talk about the audience changing, in some ways that is changed, but in other ways, the audience isn't changing as much. There still are people who want to go and enjoy an adult beverage in an environment that doesn't have that. And I think that is something that should be considered as well.
You all are already hitting on 2 things I was so excited to chat about today. You're talking about the experience. We've already heard that a billion times in just 10 minutes, but you're also talking about intentionality. So my question for all of you that I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into, how are you learning and understanding what your guests want?
I can jump in. Oh,
Kindsey?
I think, one of the, part of my job is to, throw events in the tap room, come up with ideas, have them in the tap room, whether, obviously there's easy events like doing trivia and, weekly events, run clubs, you name it, the stuff that everyone does. But, the biggest thing is like coming up with new ideas and, that haven't been done before. And then, the trial and error of that, if we did this event, nobody showed up. Okay, well, people aren't into this. And just kind of that kind of trial and error of seeing what people want to do and where what gets them out of their house and into your tap room is something we've continued to learn and see. Maybe 10 years ago, we would have been able to do this event because people were wanting to do that. Post-COVID, it's a whole nother world of how you get people out of their house and into your tap room.
It is definitely a changing game. We look at events and talk about, what worked exactly 10 years ago and what works now. And it's definitely different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we see it too at MarketMyBrewery as brewers are telling us and feeding into the system what they're doing. We see how they're interacting and responding to their customers. I mean, we have people that feature that they offer paintball. We have people that feature that they offer, trivia and bingo like you've seen. But the breadth of things that people are offering as a way to bring people in and to have that intentionality is really unique. Like breweries can fit in so many different environments. And when we think about the landscape, how many of us spent hours upon hours in non-AC warehouses in Texas, or wherever you may be. And that was enough, and I know we're going to touch on experiences. And I think that is the big thing, but again, it's creating this thing. It's interesting to see it as people find their space, and what works for somebody somewhere else doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. So it's kind of like, just because somebody else has shared that it didn't work for them doesn't mean you can't try it, because your audience, your group. And doesn't mean you can't try it again if it fails. So it's really interesting to just see this like continuum of trial and error and ultimately these peaks of success that kind of have some staying power. And then you've got to reinvent. It's fun.
Thanks,
yeah,
Josh.
I mean, we're a completely different brewery than we were 13 years ago. I've seen it, and I've been here about 2 years now, but the landscape has changed, and you have to change with it, or you won't make it.
It's either innovate or die.
Yes.
In many ways. Now, Ari, I want to go back to one thing you said a little bit earlier about the changing of the area around your brewery. It's, larger buildings, a little more money there. How are you speaking with those people in the community to see what they want?
So one thing that we do, as like Kindsey referred to earlier, is, Reddit folk talk, and they tell you what they really feel. And, there is a lot of conversation in Durham, particularly about gentrification. We're a very, very quickly growing metro area. There's a lot of talk in town about, is Durham growing the right way? But ultimately, we've dealt with, the street in front of us closed for almost 8 months, like the street, a giant generator in our front door, like blowing fumes in, like alleyway closed, no outdoor seating, construction dust, come in, oh, we're cutting your water today. Thanks. And so ultimately, we went through that pain, and let's go for the fruit. And so although we as Durham folk are concerned about gentrification, how our old neighbors are pulled out, it's still important to open up that hospitality to our new neighbors. So what are those new neighbors looking for? How do we reach them? How do we approach them with a welcome wagon amidst this conversation about how Durham has changed? And one thing we often were, particularly as one of the first breweries in Durham, one of the first, not the first, but oldest continually operating, is we were for a very long time Durham's unofficial welcome center. And we want to bring kind of that vibe back. Like, we're the place where your in-laws visit or your friends coming in from grad school come here. When Duke
the place you have to go.
Yeah. And, we do something completely different than other larger breweries. And they're awesome neighbors, awesome people to collab with. Like, I tend to have a beer with most of my brewery neighbors about once a month when I go out. But ultimately, there is something a little bit different about what we do, and how do we make people understand that messaging and how we're different from our friends, some of which I see on the chat there. Hey, Christine. Hey, Brenna.
So Ari, you're just setting me up with things I want to talk about today. So thank you for that. But first, I think you and Kindsey might need to lead a session at some point of teaching brewers how to use Reddit.
I mean, the key is, even if someone's saying something you don't like, is it true? One of our core values is seeking truth and beauty. And it's easy to dismiss anyone that says something that you don't like, but also, is there truth in that? Let that ego go and hear that feedback. And how can you take that feedback as direction?
I
think the interesting thing on that too. Oh, go ahead.
I'll say I will die on the horse that if you're a brewery, you need to be on Reddit. Here in Austin, we have an Austin page. It's really active, an Austin beer page. And I've created an account just for Austin Beerworks. So it's not me personally. I post events on there. I'm in the chats. I'm like commenting on, what's everyone's favorite Pilsner in town? And I'm just like, oh, it's Pearl Snap, which is our Pilsner, like, clearly. But like, it is so important. You get such good information. People tend, I see, to be more honest on Reddit than on Facebook, Twitter or X, because it's anonymous. So I, to me, it's really important. It can't be said for every, brewery and city, because, Austin's a little bit bigger city, but, any kind of information you can get from Reddit and you can find, do it.
Well, I was just going to add too, I think it's interesting, Ari, when you said, we're looking at this, and even if we don't agree with it, like seeking truth. And I think that's one of the hardest challenges. And like, honestly, one of the reasons that we created MarketMyBrewery and give complimentary free access for brewers to get in there is because we found there's a lot of mistruth out there about breweries, about their experiences, and about their products. So that's the question that I kind of had for you is, how do you address, or do you address, when there is those mistruths out there? How do you kind of flip the script and say, oh no, this is the experience we offer, or this is really the reality of our product? Because I've seen how fiction, or something that is completely untrue, can very quickly become fact on forums just like Reddit and Facebook and all of that. So how do y'all address that, or do you?
We are lucky. We've got some regulars that use the Bull City Reddit and the Durham Beer Reddits pretty hardcore. And when someone's popping off old information, generally the users will come in and correct. Like, Reddit is one of those places that people love to correct people. Mm-hmm. Like, if one of the quickest ways to get the right answer is to make up a persona and then just put up the wrong answer. They'll come correct you. You kind of have to trust that, but also there's no point in laying down with the bugs and getting into a shouting match. We're in the hospitality industry. I don't believe that the customer is necessarily always right, but I believe that everyone that walks in my door or engages with my brand is a guest. And you can have good guests and bad guests, right? And so one of the good things about making good guests is being a good host. And I don't think that internet snark is something you would do to an in-law or a guest in your home. So why would I do that to a potential paying customer, their friends and family in a public forum?
Yeah.
Ari, I love that. Now let's talk a little bit more about hospitality. So guests, they spend more money when they feel a connection with your staff and receive a high level of hospitality. The data supports this. And guests spend 30% more when they are wowed by your team and the experience versus the visit when the staff member is barely going through the motions. We all know what that's like. So Ari and Kindsey, I'd love to hear from you first on how are your teams helping create these more memorable, welcoming experiences that are also more profitable for your tap rooms?
I think just, telling them exactly what you said, if we're all honest, bartenders are doing this because of the tips and the money, that's what drives them. And if you're like, hey, if you just spend like 2 more minutes, like, I know you don't want to pour 8 samples for someone, but if that's what making them happy and you can do it, granted, there's not like a long line behind them, you're probably going to get a bigger tip, we have a lot of people who come into the tap room that are regulars, but being in Austin, it's kind of a tourist city. And, we're a name that gets brought up. Hey, I'm going to Austin. What brewery should I go to? Knowing that a lot of these people aren't from here. And then when they go home, they're going to tell their friends, hey, when you're in Austin, you need to go to Austin Beerworks because we had this great experience. I always tell my staff, I'm like, look, that person has their suitcase. Either we're their first stop off the plane or they made sure to hit us before we left town. I was like, think about that. That's kind of crazy that you work for a brewery that people think that, hey, I need to make sure I get there and I was like, make their experience memorable because they'll come back when they're in town and they'll tell all their friends. And, we have a lot of beers. I was like, explain it to them. Like, if you ever don't have, questions, like, just give them a sample. Like, it is annoying when someone, like I said, asks for a lot, but, that's all about the experience and, being hospitable and, treating your customers, like they're, like you want them to come back essentially.
Kindsey, outside of the samples, are there any other strategies you recommend for your staff to just engage with, people in your tap room?
One thing I always used to do as a bartender and I, tell my staff is like, if they're wearing like a t-shirt of a sports team or a hat or a band, like use that as a conversation starter. Like, say they're wearing, Texas Rangers, be like, oh, congrats on the World Series win or something like that. Like even those small little things as conversation starters could lead to something bigger. Or, you can kind of connect with that person in that moment, or they kind of feel special, like, oh, thank you. Yeah, like it's been awesome. It's the first time we've won, blah, blah, blah. Stuff like that. That's what I've always done. And that's something I tell the staff to. And it seems to work, of the times that someone is wearing something that they can, use as a conversation starter.
Absolutely. And everybody loves a compliment. It's just going to open the door for more conversation.
Yeah. Shoes, hat, whatever. Compliment them on something.
Yeah, one thing that I try to practice in my interviews, by the time someone's in front of me, I know they can pour beer. A lot of them have their CBS already, walk in the door. A lot of them have beer experience. I don't need to get into like technical brewing with you. Are you nice? Do you know how to have a real conversation? Do you know how to connect with people? Is that in your nature as a person? Like a question I kind of use often is like, tell me about a time you threw a great party.
Ooh.
And when you see how their eyes light up about hosting and guest service and like making it memorable for people, or they're like, oh, I don't really like to throw a party. If you're bartending, you're hosting a party every day. You're on stage. You're supposed to be on. You should be connecting your bar guests with each other. You should be jumping in. You should be figuring out if someone's lonely and wants to talk or if someone wants to be left alone. You're hosting a party. And if you can figure out if a person knows how to host a party, you can kind of figure out if they know about hospitality. The rest is teachable.
I always say the interview process, I can't teach someone to have a conversation and to be personable. I can teach them how to pour good beer and use the POS. There's stuff.
And I hope everybody listening is listening to this, because I know when I got into this industry, hospitality was not even in the top 10 words that we would even, I don't even know if many of us even knew what hospitality was.
We didn't know how to spell it yet, Josh.
Yeah, well, I definitely didn't, but I went to Texas public school, so there's that aspect. But yeah, I love that this conversation is happening right now about hospitality. And if you're not talking about hospitality at your location, you're not figuring this thing out. This industry needs to learn about this. And even like I was having a conversation with our team, like it just wasn't part of the thing. And so I love, Ari, that question, tell me about a time you threw a party. Like, I think that's great. And that's really what's going to further this industry, because we saw what craftitude can do, that elite snobbiness. And I think we did a pretty good job of kind of nipping that in the bud and saying, hey, we're not going to put up with that. We are a welcoming industry. We want everyone to come enjoy this, but we've got to now kind of put our money where our mouth is, and we've got to show that hospital aspect. And so again, if you're not listening to what they just said, rewind this thing when it's over and go back and listen to that, because I think that's how we're going to grow, and that's what's going to kind of right this ship.
Great, Josh.
Go ahead.
Real quick, when I got in this industry, my title is director of hospitality. I didn't even know that was a position. I always thought manager, but now I am, I make the tap rooms and food trucks and the people who are facing the customers. I'm behind all that, and it is so important nowadays in where we are in this industry than it was 5 years ago. even 3 years ago.
Ari, one thing you said that I really love was getting your guests to talk to one another. I mean, that's the community you want to build in your tap room. So I love that you threw that in there. And Josh, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit more on something because you've spent a bit of time on the brewery side. Now you're with MarketMyBrewery. Why do you believe continued education of both guests and staff is a necessity?
Yeah, I mean, I think now is the best time in all of history to be a beer drinker. We know that. But how do we share that with others, right? When we see all of these different things that are out there, these other opportunities, these other beverages, and there's nothing wrong with those other beverages, but I truly believe that beer is the best beverage to have in your hand at any given time, maybe with the exception of when you're behind the wheel of a vehicle, probably not the best time, but every other time where it's appropriate, beer is going to be the best beverage. So how do we, as beer industry professionals, as hospitality leaders, how do we share our passion and our love for this product, this artistry product with others? And I think that comes through education. For a long time, fizzy yellow liquid, which is coming back on a craft scale, but that was all that beer was thought of. And then we went through this phase where we had to teach people that all beer has hops, and we had to go through all of these nuances. Now, most of our consumers know a lot of the basics, but how do we take that foundation and build it from just awareness to passion, to love, to wanting to get into this? And I think we all are in it because we know all these things. We know that the people in this industry are great. I think it was Sam Calagione that said that this industry is 99% asshole free. I think that's still probably the case when we get to the core of the people, but by educating the consumers and bringing them into the fold and showing that hospital experience, that's what's going to continue to propel this industry. There's no reason that craft can't be, kind of the leading edge of Bev Out. But it's going to come through sharing the knowledge so that we can build the passion. And I think if you keep those two things in mind with how you educate, you'll be set up for success, because that level of education is going to differ from location to location and consumer to consumer.
Josh, one thing I'd like to add to that, because I love what all of you are saying about how it's important to create this hospitable experience. So when a guest goes to a brewery for the first time and receives that awesome experience you all are talking about in your spots, they're 99% likely to come back and tell their friends about that. But you go to a brewery for the first time and the experience is just underwhelming. With so many great options out there, the data shows that they're only 45% likely to return. And guess what that means? Unless you're driving me back there, Josh, I'm going somewhere else to have a beer and eat some lunch.
Well, I think the thing to remember too is breweries aren't just competing with breweries. We're competing with all entertainment. I can share some data. Like we see, the data looking at poor data from some of our brewery customers, the week of the holiday, what was it, the 19th or whatever, but Monday kind of had an unusual spike because it was a holiday, but beer starts to creep up and our volume starts to creep up, and then it drops on Friday. Why does it drop on Friday? Because people they're thinking, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to go experience something else. So if you are just thinking about you competing with the brewery down the road or the brewery in your area, that's not the case. You are competing with every restaurant, every experiential opportunity, and you've got to keep that in mind. So I think that's the other thing too, is how does that fit into the fold? Because if they're having a bad experience at your brewery, that may turn them off all breweries. So that kind of puts the weight on all of us to up our game.
Indeed. I love the energy of this conversation. And Michael, I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So really everything that we've just said, throwing some extra data points behind it, the number one and number two experience factors correlated to return visits. Number one is food. So to Josh's point about the competition against restaurants, pubs, bars, et cetera, you're competing against everybody. And number two is that service piece. And one of the most interesting pieces about service when we analyze it and what's going on, 1 in 3 negative experiences overall are related to first impressions. So that being either you didn't get an immediate greeting, or you didn't get, not necessarily even a greeting. If it's busy, you didn't get like an acknowledgement or a head nod or like, a point like I got you or whatever. And then the other piece of that first impression being clear ordering instructions. And it's crazy to think about 33% of negative taproom experiences, they're rooted in the first 2 to 3 minutes of when they walk into your building.
No, love the data, Michael. No, want to pick your brain some more. Kindsey, you mentioned earlier, people like making more money working in a tap room. We all want to make money. But Michael, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on how you can incentivize a team member to do a better job, engage at a higher level, really, really connect at the level and be an awesome brand advocate? What do you see and what do you suggest?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot across the industry of different things, and some of my favorite like challenges, so to speak, would not necessarily just be looking at who has the highest tip percentage or something like that, but the most flights sold, or longer tickets and things along those lines, and where you're not necessarily measuring the tips exactly, but you're measuring that engagement piece. Another thing that I've seen, and this gets a little bit tougher because it really puts it into the consumer's hands, but tagging on the Reddit conversations and Google reviews and et cetera, if people are getting mentions online, reward those folks, because that was so memorable for that customer that they have to come back because they had a great experience with so-and-so at the bar. So trying to get outside of just the like highly quantitative metrics and go beyond, and how are we able to measure our bartenders who are providing that white glove hospitality experience?
Yeah, incentives are they're kind of an interesting thing to do. We do challenges here at our tap room. I usually pick some kind of item, or a beer or something. So recently we have sour bottles, so the bombers, and those are kind of a weird thing nowadays. Like some people are still into them, some people don't. And we had a bunch of them that we just wanted to get rid of. So I said, okay, for the month of, I don't remember what month this is. So whoever sells the most, you'll get a gift certificate, whatever. And of course, you're going to have some employees who just don't care and don't try. But you have a few that do, and they kind of start competing against each other. And then by the end of the month, you see you've sold, more sour bottles than you ever could have wished for. And it's a friendly competition. We've never had any bad experiences about it. And, I just do gift card swaps. Obviously for a brewery, we have accounts that'll easily do gift card swaps because, people love getting, gift certificates to local restaurants and bars throughout town. And, the last one we did, I told the ownership, I was like, hey, we sold this many sour bottles for this month. And they were like, oh my gosh, like how, what did you do? And I told them, and, it's just a little friendly thing just to win like a gift card to a different restaurant. And some of them got their competitive juices flowing. Some of them didn't care, but the ones that did really care, they sold a lot of things that normally weren't going to be sold. And you can kind of pick anything like, hey, merch, do this, or we've done beer to go. Whoever sells the most, 6-packs, singles, whatever, you'll win at the end of the month, you'll win a gift certificate. And it seems to work really well. It boosts a little bit of sales, nothing crazy, but, just that little bit of extra effort. And then you notice those bartenders are the ones that are doing it. And, that's just, good to see them do that as well.
Kindsey, I love that you and Michael mentioned mixing up the metrics. I think it's really important to not just say every month we're going to do a to-go beer contest. You got to mix it up because certain people are going to be better at other things. And one thing to add is, you might have that one person using this to-go beer example who's your rock star, who is always going to sell the most. It can be really frustrating to see the same person recognized each time. So potentially give rewards or recognition for someone who's seen the most improvements. Look at the percent increases and potentially reward that person for doing an awesome job. Now I want to dive into something. Oh, go ahead, Kindsey.
I would say, or even seeing a part-time person kind of competing a little bit. It's like they're only there 2 or 3 days a week, but they're competing with people who are there 4 or 5. Like that's awesome to see as well.
Cool. So now I want to dive into something that we're all seeing take tap rooms by storm. Food. It's arguably an essential part of the tap room experience now, with guests being more intentional about their visits, and those visits aiming to satisfy everyone from the 4-year-old to the beer nerd they're bringing along. Food is no longer a nice to have, but it's coming a must have. And from a secret hopper data set from 2,100 unique taproom visits from 2021 and 2022, with the average tab representing just below 2 guests and including tax and tip, we see that the average visit with no food items generates a little over $39. The average food visit with over $10 in food items generates nearly $74. This is an increase in check size of nearly 88%. Ari, I'd love to hear from you first on this one. How is food a prime driver for visits at your locations?
So one thing that's really been interesting for us, we open with no food, early beer, you get a couple food trucks, you call it a day. You're not trying to run a restaurant, but then you start noticing, well, dang, I'm empty at 6 o'clock on Friday. And you know why? Because everyone went to eat. Well, where did they go? Well, why did they leave? How do I get them to stay here? So we've decided that the food is not just a little add-on, it's a part of the way we tell our story. So by having, food trucks are great, it's something to eat, it checks the box, but how do you partner with this outside business to tell your brand story? So it was important for us to bring our food in-house. Our concepts are vastly different. Our OG location in downtown is, burgers, really well executed, really good chicken sandwich, fries, like a little more traditional bar food, if you will, but reliable, solid execution at a fair price. And then our RTP location is pizza. It's our own sourdough. It's our own kind of sourdough-based bread, very unique. No one else is making the dough the way we are. No one else is putting the toppings the way we are. But we're intentionally, pairing those each week, a special pizza with a certain beer we're releasing. It's a tool to tell our brand story as well as boost those checks, right? And another thing about food right now, Reddit will tell you, everything you read online will tell you, is the cost of food is really starting to hit people in the pockets. And frankly, beer isn't, Josh talked about fizzy yellow beverage, but now we've got a fizzy yellow beverage, an artisan craft product. How do we get that consumer to see the value in our product versus a Miller Lite, right? And so telling that brand story is important, but how do we fight inflation to help our community, our neighbors, our guests? So one thing we've done, we have a $5 burger, the community burger, still local ingredients. It's a little smaller than our regular burger, but good, well executed. And we also have a $5 community beer. We're all fighting inflation, every single one of us, unless you're like wealthy. So what can we do to be more welcoming, to address that challenge and say, we're in this with you, but come join us. You can have a $5 beer and a $5 burger, and it's not going to make like a life decision about whether or not you pay your power bill. Like that 2 guests with some food, that's my power bill for the month. So like, I don't want to do that 4 times a week. Will I go out and do $10 plus tax and a good tip to the bartender 4 times a week? Absolutely.
That is so cool, Ari. Thanks for sharing that. Now, Kindsey, in Austin Beerworks Google reviews, food truck receives the most mentions. How does having full-time food trucks, help the business?
Oh, it's incredible. We were just talking about this the other day. We wouldn't have a crowd at 12 o'clock on Monday without a food truck. Our food truck too. It's an Austin Beerworks branded food truck. There are employees, and it's been, since I've started, I've seen our food sales increase. When I first started, total food sales were close to 15 to 25% of the total sales each week. Now they're 25 to 35, if not some days, pushing 40% of our sales. It brings people in, it keeps people there, and the bonus is our food's really good. We're in Austin, and our chef has done an incredible job. People come to us knowing about our food, and it's a food truck, but we obviously have a little bit more, storage space. So we're able to do a little bit more than just a normal food truck would. We have a set menu, tacos, obviously, Tex-Mex stuff, burgers, kid items for kids, shareables, like appetizers, obviously, your chips, your quesos, your salsas. And then one of the cool things we do is every Wednesday, our chef comes up with specials. So, we have people that come in on Wednesdays just for her new specials and seeing what it is. And, she mixes it up. Like, yeah, today, I wish I remembered what the sandwich was called. I had to ask her, I'm like, what is this? And she's like, oh, it's a da-da-da sandwich. And I was like, no idea what that is, but awesome. She does, Cubans or Monte Cristos or stuff that normally wouldn't be on our menu that people come in and look forward to. And one thing I thought of last night, and I'm glad I thought about it, is you're a brewery, you go out to beer festivals, right? And pour your beer for people to try it. Do the same thing with your food. We go to events for the cantina. there's a food and wine festival in Austin that we go to and feature Cantina. There's an event coming up in March that we're going to, that she will prepare a dish and promote herself. And I think there's one thing that a lot of breweries don't do is, okay, you're going to promote your beer. Why don't you go out also promote your food so that people will come for your food and then also drink your beer? She's won awards through her food, and we've just cultivated something at this tap room, the original tap room, something so special with both our beer and our food that not a lot of other places in this city have. And then our other tap room, we partnered with a famous barbecue joint, and they opened up a new concept that has been really smart to get in with somebody who's already really well known. And they opened up a taco truck, but just his, obviously in Austin, we're known for, Franklin's barbecue and Terry Black's and stuff. But, there was another huge one, and we're like, hey, would you be interested in opening a taco truck at our other location? And just his, the notoriety of that Interstellar barbecue and that name behind it has brought a lot of people out to our other location as well. So I think people need to realize, a lot of breweries now we see have food, but, taking that food and, putting them out there more, just like you do with your beer, I think is so important.
Kindsey, that's such a cool remark there. Do you see that people come to Austin Beerworks just to eat?
I mean, yeah. There's obviously people we get that just don't want to drink and they come in for food. They get food to go. I'm watching people walk by with to-go boxes in front of me. Yeah, definitely. We go out to these events and people are like, oh, I've never heard of you. And they're like, well, we're in Austin Beerworks. And they're like, oh, and it like, that is like one of my favorite, to see people act that way and just to be like, wow, this is really good. And they're like, you're a food truck? And it's like, yeah, we can make really damn good food in a food truck, and it's high quality ingredients. We don't have like $3 tacos. Our tacos are like $6 because the ingredients and then just like the time. And I never worked in food. And then now overseeing a food truck, I've learned so much about what our chef does. And I'm like, you have to do that, or you do that, or this is how you do it. Like it's amazing. And, you can, even if it's just a food truck, you can have that be kind of a nice, you can still serve really good food. It's easy to be like, oh, it's just tacos in a food truck, or you can make really good tacos in a food truck that people around the city, again, I know we're bringing up Reddit again, but I sit there on like the Reddit food thread and people are like, what are underrated tacos in the city? And to see like our food truck on there is awesome. And I think that's because we put such a importance on getting our food truck's name out there as well as our beer.
That's great. Now, Michael, I'd love to hear your insight on this one.
Yeah, I'm actually going to start with that idea of price that we talked about, where everybody's feeling it in their pockets. Breweries are feeling it in production and food costs and everything. From 2022 to 2023, the negative mentions of price doubled. So in 2022, it was about 12% of negative experiences. They mentioned prices were a little bit too high. And then in 2023, that number doubled to now essentially 1 in 4 experiences that are negative, stemming back to the price of something. And oftentimes it's food. It's a lot less of the time beer when it comes to those comments. And then kind of going to build a virtual ladder here as we talk about food being an absolute must-have, which I could not agree more, Andrew. At the very bottom of that ladder, you would have delivery services and small bites. So things that are just like chips or whatever, like we have to think of that as an absolute bare minimum at this point, because if you don't have anything, just like I think it was Ari said, 6 o'clock, you'll be empty. Then as you get higher up on that ladder, local restaurant partnership being around that second peg, then food trucks, as we've heard about, and then a limited kitchen where maybe you specialize in a couple of things in-house, and then a full kitchen. As you get higher and higher on that ladder, and obviously stay within your brand, stay within what feels right, stay within what you can do. But as you get higher and higher on that ladder, the consumer likelihood of returning again just shoots through the roof. And one thing that we've heard a lot about already are families. And if you don't have food, you can forget about having families show up.
There's got to be something.
Now let's dive into something that I think might be appealing to some of the families, because not everybody comes for beer, as we mentioned, or not everyone might be old enough to drink a beer. So let's talk beverage. You have a unique product mix that you want to resonate with more than just your average beer drinker. What do you all see people drinking more of in your tap rooms that's not beer?
I'll start. We've really leaned into the hop water market. We debuted last February our core hop water that was on tap all the time, and then just this past, I guess, January. It's still January. We debuted a seasonal. So every month we release a new seasonal beer. So the January seasonal was a black cherry hop water, and we put it on tap. It's out in the market. We canned it. You can go get it at our local. We have HEBs here. You can go get it at HEB, and it's sold very well, and people get excited about it just like they would a new beer released each month. And so we still have the berry flavor, which is our kind of original one, and then we released this black cherry one that I actually like a little bit better. So I'm excited. And it's a couple years ago you started hearing hop water, the trend with Lagunitas, I think, did one that really became popular, and then now you're seeing a little bit more. But the fact that we've really leaned into it, and we still have people come in and just order that instead of a beer, and to have it on draft, I think people really appreciate that as being an option all the time.
One thing that Fullsteam did, as we thought about what do we want to do next, how do we want to be more welcoming to our new neighbors who are going to have 6 breweries, I think, end of the day to walk to in their fancy new apartment. Well, they want things more than just beer. So we expanded our draft system from 22 taps up to 32. We've also increased, we added hard liquor. I have 2 draft cocktails that rotate seasonally. I'm having a ball. I was at Cheesecake Factory, star bartender, working my way into beverage development for 10 years. So I love a good cocktail. So we're doing that, but we're keeping it true to brand. We're not shooting out shots. We're not in there like having 25 different cocktails. We're not a cocktail bar, but we can make a good quality cocktail that helps tell our brand story. And again, that pilot system will help us brew some other cool things. I brew my own kombucha. We have a local kombucha partner we're working with to kind of do some things together, some really cool stuff that's going on. I'm a big fan of Tapache. So people are learning about Tapache because I'm drinking it every day and I'm trying to keep it on draft whenever I can. We partner with the local meadery for some co-branding things. We've got some cider friends we really like. And, I've found some pretty quality draft wine as well. And that just really cuts your waste down quite a bit when you get it on draft, hard to beat with a margin there. So more than just beer, but also don't miss the beer. I do worry about folk trying to be a jack of all trades and end up mastering none. Our story is still the beer, but I've got some appendices for you.
I like it. Now, Josh, you talk so much about experience. Where do events fall in, how necessary they are for a brewery to have a pretty robust event schedule?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the overall experience, right? What are you trying to create? And events are a great way for you to invite either your regular audience and kind of bolster that affinity. They're also a great way to invite audiences that may or may not ever have heard of you. I think Kindsey going to the food events, that's a great way. It's an offsite event, but it's an event that's bringing people back. The brewery that I previously worked at, we did all kinds of stuff. We did these Japanese food markets. We did Day of the Dead celebrations. We did just a huge variety, and that brought people who had literally told us, they're like, I would have never even known you existed. I've never been here before. I'm not a beer fan. And I would have never come here had it not been for this event. But now that I've been here, I've tried your food. Or, hey, I talked to the bartender and they actually convinced me to try, your hard seltzer. Or they talked me up on this IPA and I thought I hated IPAs. And now I absolutely love IPAs. So I think events kind of allow you to do 2 things. It allows you to continue to build and maximize on your brand image, but then it also allows you to extend your brand image and extend your reach to others as well. And I think just one thing to touch on that with events is, and I think going back to non-alc just a little bit, is non-alc isn't just non-alc beer. I think we said a lot of things about doing cocktails, doing hop waters. With the performance platform, which is a draft inventory management system that we have under the BrewLogix umbrella, we have several breweries who are customers of that. And we've got one that makes a scratch made lemonade. They're selling that for $6 a pint, and they're selling a ton of it, and it's about 2% of their overall volume. But just think, if they didn't have that option, they'd be losing out on all that volume, but they also could be potentially losing out on a group of people who somebody wants that option. They also do wine on draft. Again, it's about 1% of their overall throughput. But because they have that, it allows people to stay. So I think that's a thing to consider too when you're thinking about events, whether you're bringing in specialty beverage for that event, or you're doing it as a mainstay and making sure that you're showcasing you have that. Because there are people who come to events and like, I don't want to go to an event at a brewery. I don't drink. You need to be able to showcase all the other things that you bring to the table rather than just being a manufacturer of bev alcohol.
Whenever we promote an event or whatever, I try to make sure that people know that we have more than just beer. We have wine, cider, hop water. We carry sparkling water. Rambler's a huge brand here in Texas. We do cold brew coffees in cans. We kind of joked the other day how much money we make off selling Capri Suns, which is kind of a weird thing to joke about, but we sell so many Capri Suns, and not even just to kids. Some adults come in and buy them too. So, we go to Costco once a week and just buy the big giant packs. So just having options for everyone. The other day, our taproom manager brought in lemonade because so many people had asked about it, and we're already going through a lot of that. So that's another thing. It's like asking your customers, what kind of non-alcohol options do you want to see in here? And someone's like, someone brought up cold brew and we got cold brew in. So I think that's a big part. And yeah, events, going back to the events things, they're huge, I always say people kind of need a reason to come out to your brewery nowadays. You can't just be in a warehouse and serve good beer. You have to have food. You have to have an area for kids. You have to have events, even if it's a Tuesday night and you have an event and like 6 people show up. Hey, guess what? That's 6 people who weren't normally going to come tonight. Maybe they have 1 beer, maybe they have 2, that's still more sales that you were originally going to have. So no matter how small the event is or how big the event is, they're just so important to have just because they get people in your tap room that normally wouldn't be there. People, it's so easy to sit at home, drink beer that you bought 6 cans for $12 at the store instead of buying 2 for 12 or, even 2 for 14, So give them a reason to come out to your brewery, whether that's a food, having a player and any other, reason. Like that experience of coming out is just so important to people nowadays.
I'm so thankful for the 4 of you being here because we align on so many levels. Like things I had to plan to say myself, I don't have to say because you all are just knocking it out the park. So now I really want to pick your brains, and I'm just curious about something. Is there anything that's currently surprising you about the state of tap rooms? And if so, how are you responding to it? Or for the Michaels and Joshes of the room, I'd love to hear any recommendations you might have.
I think for me, go ahead, Ari.
One thing that I've noticed as a consumer, and as most of us are trying to expand, hoping to expand, Kindsey's had success. We've expanded. We're considering to look at expansion. Our neighbors are expanding. We're getting new neighbors who've expanded in the air market. Is, real estate speculation has kind of forced the hand on some choices. Mm-hmm. And I worry about my neighbors and friends in the industry missing key opportunities to tell their brand story because they're getting that warm shell in the bottom of a high-rise apartment. And it's like, hey, man, you're cool. I want to hang out with you. Your tap room doesn't do anything for me that makes me feel excited about being here, because it does have to be more than the beer. And so I do kind of worry as folk are looking to expand and, going for that soft, warm shell, that they're missing some key opportunities to stand out. But, luckily, most of us are making pretty good beer, and hopefully that'll be enough because I'm team everybody. Like I want everybody to win. So like when I see folks moving and maybe, you got to get open, your lease is going, maybe, take that extra week and like get some cool paint or something. Like I feel like it's almost becoming too commodified and there's not enough stories of who you are. And I really think the lost brand stories is something I really worry about as we come up, because like I'm there for your vibes and your people, but you got to give me a vibe, even if your people are great. I don't want to feel like I'm sitting in someone's like law library having a beer.
Yeah, and I would echo a lot of that sentiment. As a beer consumer myself, I've been lucky enough to travel the world drinking beer. through work and through just my personal life. And, having been to close to 1,000 breweries at this point, I'm still surprised at the lack of intentionality. Even this couple weekends ago, I went, my daughter was taking a nap and I was like, I got to go to the hardware store. Found an excuse that there was a brewery on the way there and a brewery on the way home. So I stopped in and grabbed a pint at each one. And again, fine experiences, but you walk in, there wasn't a whole lot of character. It seems like some people were just stuck. And so it's like, if you're listening to this conversation, I'm probably not talking to you, but I hopefully send this to somebody who needs to hear this, because the thing is, if we're going to survive, if we are going to keep the scales where they are and not start to see a massive loss of breweries, where we start to see more closings than openings, we're right there at that teeter point. If we don't step up our game as an industry, that's going to happen. And, things shake out how they will, but I think the most surprising thing for me in taprooms is the lack of intentionality. And oftentimes it happens because you see it every day and you're like, oh yeah, we've got all kinds of character. Look at this story from when Bill broke the chair and I've got the bar stool hanging on the wall. Nobody else knows that story. So you've got to kind of take that step back and say, if I've never been here before, what image am I projecting? What experience am I projecting? And I think if everybody takes a day, maybe not leading into the weekend, but takes today to just walk around your facility and be really thoughtful, you will find some opportunities that you can elevate your experience, and that will make a difference. So I guess for me, the surprising thing is the people who aren't spending the time to do that. And that's what's going to ultimately, be the make or break moment.
Appreciate that, Josh. Michael?
Yeah, quick surprise. For the first time in my history of doing these national level research reports, the mentions of family policies and family friendliness actually overtook pet friendliness and pet policies, which I think speaks to how we kicked this off, of the changing dynamic and changing generation, people having kids. Maybe they started with pets and then now it's more about kids. But I do think that it can be a secret superpower for breweries if it is within their brand to offer that family experience.
Love the insight, Michael. No, I want to have one final question. I appreciate you for being here today. I appreciate everyone joining. So the question is, I love these hours to end with not just so much great conversation, but everybody feeling a sense of urgency to do something. So for the four of you, what is the one thing you hope everybody listening or watching in the future goes and does right now?
Happy to kick this off. Owners, managers, etc., making sure that you are emphasizing the importance of guest acknowledgement when they walk in the door. Literally 1/3 of all negative taproom experiences coming from that. Like, easy win. You just get rid of 1/3 of your negative experiences right there by a smile and a greeting and acknowledgement.
Secret Hopper data shows the same thing. Out of the 5 most important touch points, the hello and the goodbye are right in there. Love it.
I would say, just connect with your employees. It's so easy as the bigger you get, when I doubled my staff, it's so easy to just kind of, not connect with connect with the, my managers and then the staff, like check in, like, we do reviews every year, but, make sure that's not the only point that you're sitting down with employees and just kind of check in. And how are you? How are things behind the bar? Like, I know I always say my door's open if you ever need to come to me, but, this is a good time for you to talk to me. Do you have advice? Should we change something? What are you hearing? Like, just make your employees, especially your bartenders, feel so involved, and they're the really important ones. They're the ones talking to your customers every day. Nobody knows who our head brewer is, and he doesn't want to be known. They see the bartenders. The bartenders are the ones that are talking to your guests. So just make them feel so important, because they are. Make sure they know how important they are and how appreciative you are of them, and just check in with them more often than probably a lot of people are. And your part-time ones. Your part-time people are important too.
Love that. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, if I give one thing to walk away with to do right now, is just to take a moment to evaluate what you offer. What is your experience? What are your products? What is your story? Even if there's a really quick answers, and they should be, you live in it every day. Really where the challenge comes, if they're not quick, then there's a longer story. But I would say take the moment right now to be thoughtful, to evaluate what you offer, how you're projecting that experience, and ultimately how it's being received. And I think if you're able to do that, you'll be able to very quickly realize where you have some opportunity and where you're doing really well. Celebrate your wins, address your opportunities, and go and be successful, And a little plug, I would hope everyone would go get on MarketMyBrewery and showcase what the experiences that they're creating to our consumers, to consumers in general, so that they can go and have those experiences. Because I've been to some really great hidden gems that I would love for them to stay hidden gems, but I also want to see them propped up and see more people in that tap room so that it does exist. Because every single person who's on this call who's creating a craft beverage product is creating an experience for somebody. And I just hope that everyone can find the way to showcase that and continue to bring new and existing people into the fold.
Thank you, Josh. Now, Ari, bring us home on this one.
Wow, the pressure after such great answers. I had like 3 ready. Okay, you stole all mine. But for me, I think, community is such an important part of Fullsteam. And what I would challenge everyone to do, and it touches on what both Kindsey and Michael were saying as well, find a way to challenge each of your employees to find one thing to show more kindness to their customer. That goes into the quick greet. Yeah, they haven't been waiting long, but just to say, hey, I'm coming is a little more kind than just letting them wait. To say to your bartender or your dishwasher or your line cook, hey man, how's it going today? Those little touches really mean a lot and kind of bring up that whole feeling of togetherness, community, and hospitality. So I would challenge everyone to find one thing to do that's a little bit more kind.
Ari, I can't wait to share a beer with you on Monday, but for anyone who's not going to be there, how can they get in contact with you to pick your brain a little bit more?
Ari at fullsteam.ag. Yes, .ag. Southern beer economy starts with agriculture. So that is Ari at fullsteam.ag.
Awesome. Thanks, Ari. Kindsey, how can anyone reach out to you?
So it's Kindsey, Kindsey, at austinbeerworks.com.
Thank you. And Michael?
Same deal. It's Michael at craftbeeradvisoryservices.com.
Yeah, following the trend, mine's pretty simple, josh.lindsay at brewlogics.com. Or if you're a social person, you can hit me up on Instagram at brew.ed _ Josh Lindsay. So love talking to tap rooms, and hopefully we can connect in person on my travels and visits to go see what you guys are creating.
Awesome. Well, Kindsey, I really want to try your hop order at some point. It sounds amazing what you've built there for beverage and experience. Ari, I got to have that burger really soon, and I love the intentionality. Michael, you're not too far from me. I look forward to the next pint we're going to share soon. And Josh, I know we got a few times together this year, at least a few times together, and I can't wait to see you again soon. So Kindsey, Michael, Josh, and Ari, I really appreciate you being here today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Much.
Cheers.